Right, a couple things as we start. First, I did get the test graded. I've got some of the homeworks graded and not all of them. I'm going to try to finish those because we're going to have time today. All right, so that's the first thing. If you don't agree with the grading or you have a question or whatever, please see me, email me, or whatever. You know, I told the class this morning, you should always fight for every point you can. You know, I don't have any problem with all of that. All right. I will have, what I've decided to do is to kind of break this up, this chapter, because it's so long, being 125 pages. Right now we're going to talk about menus and pickers, as you can see, and it's about 40 pages. That's the bad news. The good news is that when you are setting up a project, if you set it up the way that they show you, you don't have to do probably 80% of the stuff that's in there. It's all done for you automatically. So what they say is, if you didn't do that, you can do this. If you didn't do this, you can do this. But if you did this, just skip it. All right? So we're going to assume that if you want to do that, that you will be able to. All right? All right. I'm working on your next homework. Believe it or not, it's done, but I just have to write it up. All right? So I will do that. Okay, and I will have that out to you by no later than the end of the period today. So, section 4.3, as you can see, it starts on page 45, and it is entitled Menus and Pickers. And there are a lot of different types of menus that you can create in Android. All right? Now, one of the things, you may or may not remember this, but when we went over the resume app, we had a button. We had 4 buttons, right? You had your picture and then 4 buttons. First button said either educational or education. And then the next one was like work history. Then there was one that said call me and one that said email me. And there's nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that it would look better, I think, if on our resume app that when we wanted a person to call or to text or whatever, we put it up here. You look up on the screen. And that's what we're going to end up doing. It's because it looks better. That's all. Plus, it would open up more room on your screen for other things if you decided you wanted to put something else there. All right? So I'm not going to sit there and lecture at you on what a menu is. You know what a menu is. You've written menus in other languages before. At a minimum, you've written them for web pages. You've also written menus for C#. All right? And the author goes through and talks about some of the many different kinds of menus that you can create in here. All right? Here's an options menu. And really, it's typically for the area that's in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You click there, and you can bring a drop-down down if you want to. It's got menu options. If you don't like to do that, or if it doesn't make sense for that particular thing, you've got a couple contextual. There's a contextual menu right there. And notice in this case, the third one here, when you click on this option, it brings up a contextual app bar up here. All right. Then finally, in the last one, there's a pop-up. And I think most of us, at least me, you're used to pop-up menus for if you right mouse click. Typically, almost in any product there is, anywhere on the screen, when you right mouse click, you bring up a pop-up menu. All right, so you can have those as well. So the author goes through and talks about, the app bar, also known as the action bar, where it is, etc. And there's nothing wrong with the explanation here. All right. Again, we will create something that looks a little bit more like what you see on the screen right here. All right. In other words, in addition to your title, we'll have some options that are over here. How many options? That depends on you. It is going to be your resume app. You may decide over here that you don't want any of these icons, and you don't even want this. You just want a drop down that has 4 or 5 different options. Or you might want a couple options here as are shown, and when you get the ellipsis like this, it's known as an overflow area. All right, so you might want to do it like that. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. All right, because again, you've heard me say this before. It's your app. All right. Now, right here in number 1, this thing that they show here, you know, we called it back in Bootstrap days a hamburger menu, but this is called a navigation button or an up button. And as far as the up stuff, we're going to go through that, not today. All right, we'll talk about that tomorrow. All right, and they talk about the title, they talk about the action icons and the overflow, so I've kind of just done this. All right, and they show an example in here. Again, draw your own conclusion as far as what's the best way to do this. All right. They mention here frequently used option menu items should appear as icons in the app bar. The problem with that is, what if you have a half dozen of them? If you've got 6 different icons in that app bar, even if you can fit them in, it looks really congested. All right, probably not what you want. All right, in that case, you'd probably want to use an overflow area. Now, they mention here, it says, each activity that uses a default theme has an action bar as its app bar. We've been using the default theme, the one that just comes with Android the whole semester. When we get into Chapter 5, which will be no earlier than next week, all right, but once we get into there, we will talk about how you can change themes. That chapter talks about themes, dimensions, a little bit on color, etc. So please look up on the screen, because this is 90% of this lecture right now. If you look up on the screen, it says if you start an app project using the basic activity template, the template adds virtually not everything you need, but probably a good 3/4 of everything you need. So what they do is they say in here, well, if you're not using it, this is the kind of stuff you have to do. I would recommend, you know, if you think that you're going to be using a menu, you're not on this next set of assignments. All right. But when we come back, and we could come back to the resume app, which will probably be next week, all right, yeah, then we will have a menu in there. All right. But if you're not sure, you know, as it says, instead of choosing an empty activity, choose a basic activity, because that way you've got the stuff that's all provided for you. All right. And again, they talk about themes here, starting on page 50. It says, using themes to design an app bar. You are not hamstrung by what we've done so far. All right? You've already seen that I've gone in, for example, and changed background color. You could change the color on virtually everything and anything. The other thing that you're going to find when we get into the next chapter, in Chapter 5, is if you're constantly setting this. For example, I almost always set the size of my buttons to be 125 dp wide and either 25 dp high or 50 dp high. There's nothing wrong with going in and setting each one like that, but it's more work than you have to do. What we'll talk about in the next chapter is how we can go and set the dimens.xml file and have it say, hey, whenever you make a button, make it that size. All right? So we can set defaults and the like. Now notice it says here, I'm up to page 52, adding code to set up an app bar. Yeah, if you choose basic activity, a lot of stuff will be written for you. That said, you're going to get a bunch of default stuff. So if you don't like the default stuff, you are responsible for changing it. Not only that, if you set up a menu, you have to be the one. Menus respond typically to click events. They can also respond to long click events, gestures, etc. But usually it's a click event. So you're still going to be responsible for writing and calling the methods that you want to have run, all right, when you choose a menu option. So there's a lot of this in here, as they show on page 53. All right. Again, typically if you want to create something new that didn't previously exist, you create your own XML file, whether it's a menu resource file or anything else. All right. Then when you actually want to use, for example, a menu, as it says, it's called inflating the menu. So notice there is an onCreateOptions menu method in your activity. And in that particular method, you will inflate the menu. When you inflate the menu, you make it available for use. And again, they say, yeah, create your actions. But I went back and reread this today, and there's so many places where they just turn around and say, well, if you started with a basic activity from the start, you can skip this section. All right. I'd rather do that. I'd rather have the system write the code for me and have to go and modify that than have to write it myself. So they show here how you can set up settings and how you can have different menu items appear. Again, it is totally up to you. So if you look at the example here, I'm on page 57. All right, you'll notice there's a natural ordering. So there's order, status, favorites, and contact. And notice it says 10, 20, 30, and 40. You could have said here 10, 11, 12, and 13, and they would have been smashed together. But by putting 10 in between there, if you decide later, now you can go back and you can add additional options. All right. And as far as it says there, it says show action. Be real leery with this one. If you look, I'm on page 58, and if you look up on the screen, it says always is the first one, which means always show the menu. If you've got a really, really big menu and you have it where it's always showing and somebody's looking at it on a smaller phone, all right, they're probably not going to get much out of using whatever it is you're trying to get them to use. So you typically would use like if room. All right. And as it says, only place this item in the app bar if there's room for it. And again, here are some examples. So again, you can see they have both icons and they have the overflow area that also will do the same thing. Now, there are built-in icons for these things. All right, and I think we've talked about this before, but on the off chance we have not, if I go in here and I go over to, where is it, Res, I believe layout, and we go to new, and I think it's either image asset or vector asset. All right, you go over here, there will be a whole bunch of images as you go through this that you can use. All right, again, I don't remember if it's not there. All right. I said I don't remember if it was vector or not. So I think when you click clip art, and there you go. Come on. See that? Those are the ones that you are really supposed to use. If you go, well, they're black and white, I hate them. Well, I mean, it's not that you can't use your own, but these are considered pretty much the standard ones to use. All right, so if you decide you want to use any of those icons, again, what I did, and I screwed it up the first time, but I right mouse clicked on the app, okay, chose new, went down to vector asset, and clicked on where it said clip art. Okay. I will expect, and you're going to get this probably either the Monday or the Tuesday that we get back from the break. But I'm going to have for you a list of what I'm going to expect you to put into this app that you're building yourselves. All right? And one thing that'll be in there is either some kind of a simple menuing structure or a convenient way to get around. And I don't think just putting buttons all over the place is necessarily a convenient way to get around. All right, so here's, again, some contextual menus. I just said this before, but I want you to see it. In this case, if you click on one of the options that are behind the gray here, this thing automatically comes up. All right, but over here, if you click on one of the options, and this is a recycler view or a list view, we're going to be talking about that starting tomorrow already. Then what changes here are the pictures. All right, the icons that you're using. Floating context menu is just that. All right, and really, this is a floating context menu. Okay, but with a true floating context menu, you've got some control over where on the screen it is going to appear. All right. Pop-ups we've already talked about. Again, make a lot of sense in some applications, don't make a lot of sense in most other ones. Dialogues. You can create your own dialogue. All right. For instance, if you were creating a game, you may want to ask the user something as simple as, you know, would you rather have a darker background and light colored characters, or a light color background and dark color, or whatever. All right. They give some examples. There's one here. Do you want to use Google's default location service? All right, that kind of thing. Not only that, we've used these before in C#, and you've used these in HTML. You can have date pickers that you can set up. So if you were going to set up some kind of an appointment app, you very well might want to use a date picker. All right. When you create these, what you're using typically, as it says right there, is what's referred to as an alert dialog. All right. You are presenting some information to the user, and you are expecting the user to answer, for lack of better words. All right. So you're asking them something. If you look at the example here, the one on the right, discard the draft. If you click cancel, it doesn't. If you click discard, it's gone. That kind of an idea. And they show you how to come in here and build an alert dialog. We'll get into some of this stuff later on and how you can display it. All right. The last thing that's in this section that we're going to go over, it's only 3 or 4 pages, but if you look up on the screen, it's important. All right. They start to talk in here about fragments. What you can do with a fragment is you can take your screen and you can split your screen into subscreens. This is especially helpful when you've got an Android app that you're going to run in landscape mode, because you can split your screen in half or in thirds. It can get to be really ugly when you try to do it in a vertical or a portrait orientation. It's not that you can't. Usually you don't want to because it's just too hard for the user to understand. But they come in here and they start talking about fragments. We're going to be using fragments starting next week. All right, so please read those 3 or 4 pages. And I wasn't going to, but this didn't take very long. So let's jump through at least, or go through part of this user navigation thing that's on here. All right, we're not going to get to the rest of the chapter here. There's 40 more pages, but we'll get through about 20 to 30. All right, so it says providing users with a path through your app. Again, I'm not saying anything here that you don't already know. That if you are creating an app that you want people to buy, why are they going to buy it? Because they're going to use it. Why are they going to use it? One reason, hopefully they'll want to use it, is that it's intuitive. All right? That they know based on other types of apps that they've used, this will be over here, this will be over here, this button will do this kind of thing. All right? Sometimes the best way to learn, okay, so let's say you guys are working on your projects and Chris decides he's going to do some kind of an appointment app and he's not even sure where to start. Well, a really good place to start is to go to the App Store, all right, and take a look under free apps for an appointment app and start looking through the ones that are in there and see, is there a kind of a common theme that's going on? All right. Is there one of these that I think, well, this is cool, but it should have this? Or maybe you find 2 or 3 where you want to combine different features from them. That kind of an idea. But as it says, with user navigation, you want to provide users with a path through your app. Most of us are used to hitting the back button to get where you want to go. All right. There's also, as it says, hierarchical navigation, where users navigate through a hierarchy of screens. Screens are organized with a parent screen for every set of child screens. It depends, though, as always, on how complex the application is going to be. When you are doing your app that you're going to end up presenting at the end of the semester, all right, I'm still kind of don't know whether I want a minimum of 3 screens or a minimum of 5 screens. And you might hear that 5 screens. It's not that much. It really and truly isn't. What's going to happen after the break, too, just so you know, we have the equivalent of about 7 or 7.5 weeks left. And the plan is probably every Thursday and Friday will be lab days, for sure, for you to work on this. Now, it doesn't mean you can't work if you've got a homework that you can't work on that, but it's going to be time basically dedicated for you to work on your app. All right, so they show the back button navigation here and what you have to do. We've gone through stuff like this. And then they show a hierarchical. Again, with the hierarchy, what they're saying is you've got a screen, like some kind of a main screen that they show here that would be for your news app, kind of like a newspaper. All right. Then you might have here, politics, sports, weather, etc., and you break it down like that. All right. And again, not that I don't think you understand, but even something as simple as this. This is CNN.com. That's what they do. All right. So they basically have got it set up like, in a similar type of way. So when you do that, you've got a hierarchical type of setup, as it says. A parent screen enables you to go from the parent down to any child. Not to a child of a child necessarily, but to any child. All right, they break it down. It says first level, child screen siblings. Second level, how deep does it go? It depends on how deep the activity is. I'm not going to expect that when you do these things that you're going to create an app that has 30 screens on it. I'm not saying you couldn't do that, but that probably would be a heck of a lot of work. and they talk about setting it up with a main activity, with an activity for each child, with a fragment for each child. There's different ways this can be done. All right. Most of us, again, are, when you start working on this, hopefully you know this already when you look here. But if I go and I want to go back, I don't know why this is that big, but it is. Down here, you've got your back button right here. All right. All right. They also talk in here about ancestral navigation, the up button. As it says, with ancestral navigation in a multi-tiered hierarchy, you enable the user to go up from a section of a sibling to the collection, then up to the parent. So you're iterating your way up, all right? Not necessarily back. Could be, but it's not necessarily back. But it's going up the hierarchy. So it's like with, if you're a schlub like me down at the bottom, I'd be there. Then somebody like Mr. Corrigan would be up here. You'd go up to another level, all right, etc., and another level, and eventually you'd get to our president. Not only can you ascend, you can descend. So not only is there ascendant navigation, there's descendant navigation. Again, in an ideal world, you are creating an app, regardless of how many screens it has, that is simple enough that a person can look at it and figure out how to get where they want to go. All right? Now, we talked about this. You may or may not remember this. We talked about this in the first semester of the AWD1112 class, that on a website, they call it the 3-click rule. You should be able to get to anywhere on a website within 3 clicks. All right? That's not even always possible, but that's an ideal thing to shoot for. Kind of nice to have something similar here. All right? I mean, if you make something too hard, especially if a person's using their phone and you make it too hard, the buttons are too small, the icons don't make any sense, except they're just not going to use it. Doesn't matter if it's free or not. All right? All right. They do mention if you don't want to use buttons, they call them targets, where you can use stars and a bunch of other stuff. All right. You can read that at your leisure if you want to. So again, we are going to be doing a certain amount of this. If you look up on the screen here, I'm up to page 105. It says smartphones are best suited for displaying one screen at a time. For example, a master screen on the left and a detail screen on the right. So you click here, you get to here, type of thing. All right. I think that's pretty much what I did want to go over. They talk here about defining the tab layout. All right, so you can set the tab layout just like we set the tab order in C#, if there's a reason for doing that. All right, what we will do tomorrow, just so you're aware of this, and it's either tomorrow or Thursday, we'll see. But we're going to go over these last 10 pages. If you look up on the screen, please make sure that by no later than tomorrow, you read these 10 pages. All right? Because you will probably have 2 tests for Chapter 4, and the second test, you will have to create your own recycler view. You say, I don't know what they are, that's what we're going to start doing. All right, so I'm not going to go through this section on this right now. But if you do want to take a look at it, and you're like, I looked at it and I really don't understand it very well, well, if you go to dev.android.com, all right, and you look over there and you go in or developer.unread.com. If you go in there and you search for Recycler View, all right, they've got tons of stuff on it. Okay. All right, now I'm going to show you this because virtually everybody in here has got the homework done already, and I want to make sure you can do something. So let me just show you this. I'm going to give you a hard copy as soon as I get the rest of it put together. All right. So first thing that I want you to do is you're going to create an Android app that, if you don't like that name, you can change it. But I called it Mock Form. Look on the screen, please. You're going to create something that looks, sort of at least, that sort of looks like this. All right. Hopefully yours will look nicer than mine. I was screwing around with it. It looked much better than it did, or than it does right now. But notice, edit text, edit text, edit text, spinner. All right. Radio buttons that are in a radio button group, checkboxes, and switch control. And also, this is a button. It's an image button. All right, I don't know if I've got this one up right now or not. Let's see. Yes, I do. So again, I can come through there. There's all my information. And when I click over here, it just shows a toast with everything I've chosen. See that? So that's the first thing that you're going to do. What it's going to make you do is walk your way through the stuff that's on the first 45 pages or so of this particular chapter, because they give you examples on how to use and set up all these. All right? That's what I used for most of them, at least. Next. And bless you. Yeah, you've done it before. Yes, it's going to be another rock, paper, scissors game. All right? So if you look up on the screen here, I'm having you change it around from the way I have it, but this is how I did it. Not like that. It'll come up in a second. All right. These are image buttons. If you don't like those, like mine, find your own. That's fine. Notice I choose rock. Okay, and you can see who wins. It's keeping a running total. All right, and I want those to be image buttons. But the stuff that's down on the bottom here with the total wins, I want you to use an intent and put that on another page. All right, I don't think that's asking very much. And judging by the test, some people were still having some problems with intents. All right. The last one that I'm going to want you to do, and again, it's almost 1:15. I'm going to try to get this whole thing to you within a half an hour. But this last one, let me close this and open up